It's time for another installment of Sea Hunt, It's Still Alive here on Scuba Shack Radio. And this time we are headed back to Season 2 for Episode 33, titled Proof of Guilt, which premiered exactly 62 years ago today on August 16th, 1959. In this episode, Mike is in the Hawaiian Islands where he is working for a manufacturing company testing out underwater motion picture and television cameras. In the opening scene, he is diving with a huge film camera. The plankton is up, cutting the visibility, but is also bringing in fish and the man-eating sharks. We see a number of white tips circling, and they're getting closer and closer as Mike sees their cold eyes. They're getting too close for comfort, so Mike decides to head to the shallows. When he gets to the pier, he sees a note underwater on the slate that says, "Come up." Mike tells us that there is greater threats up there than the sharks. When he gets out of the water, Mike is met by Lieutenant Dave Kalkoa of the Honolulu Police Department. He asks why the note. Well, Dave says it wasn't from him. The camera moves to a woman who says it was from her. Her name is Sandra Otani, or Sandy. She says she put the note down there. You see, she owns Naulua Island, where she grows cultured pearls offshore. Someone is stealing her pearls, and she needs Mike's help and his cameras to get the evidence that Dave needs to arrest them. Mike tells Sandy that he won't give her the camera, as they only go with him. Sandy smiles and tells Mike that she wants him to go with the cameras. That Mike is a smooth operator. The scene now shifts to the beach on Sandy's Island, where both Sandy and Mike are gearing up to do a shore dive out to the pearl beds. Sandy shows Mike the pearl beds and is getting angry underwater as she finds the broken oyster shells. As they are walking out of the water, Mike tells Sandy that it is the perfect place for a scuba hit and run. Sandy tells Mike that some of the pearls have been growing for 30 years. Mike asks her exactly how they cultivate the pearls. Sandy says that it's a secret that came with her father from Japan. But since she won't tell him the secret, she'll make it up to them with the best dinner he ever had. Now the next morning, Mike is ready to set a trap for the pearl robbers. He's hiding in the rocks with a pair of binoculars in his full scuba rig, looking for any suspicious activity. He spots a boat, but he doesn't see the divers go into the water on the other side of the boat. He does, however, see their bubbles, and heads out with his camera to catch them in the act. At the pearl beds, Mike hides behind a rock, with the camera as the divers approach. As they start to rob the beds, Mike starts to film. But he gets careless, he says. The sound of the camera alerts the divers. One of the bad guys circles around and surprises Mike. They get into a fight. The other bad guy grabs the camera and pulls out the film. Now, while the underwater fight is going on, Sandy was watching from the beach, and she suspects trouble, and is racing to the pearl beds with her boat. The bad guys rip Mike's regulator out of his mouth, but as they are scared off by the sound of Sandy's boat, Mike is left helpless. Miraculously, Mike doesn't drown. He recovers, and we see some eagle rays in the background. As he heads to the surface, he's blowing bubbles all the way up. We now see the camera resting on the bottom. Mike struggles back on the boat, is gasping for air as Sandy asks him if he is all right. In the next scene now, we see Mike lying on a chair. Sandy's giving him some tea. He says he doesn't want any more and starts to work on a plan to catch the bad guys with Lieutenant Dave. Sandy says she wants to let them have the pearls because they're not worth Mike's life. But Mike says it's not about the pearls anymore. It's a personal grudge. He needs Dave's help to put them on TV. Now Mike is going to use the underwater television camera to catch the thieves. He shows Dave how it's going to work as he pans across the island. Just then, Mike points the camera towards Dave and Sandy. Dave says, "Hey, look at the prettiest girl on Nalu Island," as Sandy strikes a pose for the camera. And she says she's the only girl on Nalua Island. As Mike looks to take off underwater, Sandy gives him a big kiss for luck. And Mike says he's never had any better luck. Back underwater with the TV camera, Mike is waiting for all three villains as they are now jumping in the water to steal the pearls. But this time one of them has a spear gun. Mike has the TV camera pointed at the pearl beds, but there's a problem. The bad guys are coming from the wrong direction and they're not on TV. They ambush Mike, whose only hope is to maneuver them into the frame of the camera. Chaos prevails as they fight and slash at one another. Finally, Mike gets them to the pearl beds. The spear gun is fired and strikes the bed. Fortunately, Sandy is watching and yells to Dave, "Look at this! Cast off!" Now the cops are headed to the fight. During the fight, Mike's left arm is slashed, but he continues fighting, pulling the regulator out of one of the bad guy's mouth. Just then he sees the two Hawaiian police officers free-diving in their swimming trunks and says they look like angels. With the odds now even, justice prevails, and the bad guys lose again. In the final scene, they are back on the shore of Nalua Island. Mike's arm is bandaged, and Dave asks him if he needs a ride back to Honolulu. Sandy tells Dave that Mike is going to be on vacation. Dave says to Sandy, nobody likes a cop. Sandy says she will give him the best testimonial, but also gives Mike another big kiss, to which Mike replies, "That is the best testimonial in my life." Now, I'm not exactly sure where this episode was filmed for the topside scenes, but it sure does look like Hawaii. However, you never know when it comes to television or the movies. The part of Sandy was played by Nobu McCarthy, and Ken Drake played Lieutenant Dave Kalkaua. And here's one final interesting tidbit. This episode was remade in the 1987 version of Sea Hunt, and it was titled Pearl Beds. And just so you know, I'm still trying to get my hands on that 1987 series with Ron Ely. Maybe someday.